Tokyo is a megacity. For a long time, the Japanese capital was the largest city in the world by population, the metropolis with the highest property prices and one of the most densely populated places on the planet. The underground system pumps around 10 million commuters a day into the center of the city, like a giant aorta providing the heart with fresh blood. Tokyo is a macrocosm, a world of its own, with its own system of rules and movement. Fast, incredibly efficient, admirably disciplined. In Tokyo, there is a whole school of architecture concerned with small-scale apartments. Property prices are so astronomically high that minimalism is a necessity. The art of architecture here is to make creative use of space while taking account of new family structures. Architect Osamu Nishida.
Single households account for more than 30% of all households in Japan, and two-person households a little over 20%. Together, that makes more than 50% of the population living alone or with one other person. So we build apartments for smaller and smaller families. But even though we make a great effort to design compact and practical apartments for single occupancy, people don't really feel comfortable in them.
The Yokohama Apartment is in Yokohama City, which merges seamlessly with Tokyo and is thus a place of retreat for more than 1 million commuters. Osamu Nishida and his office On Design sought to achieve something extraordinary in this project, a dwelling that works like a flat share and turns the negatives associated with compactness into positives. In this apartment house, an open-access inner courtyard provides communal living space. It's larger than the private rooms, which are clearly identifiable as cubes or boxes accessed from the all-dominating courtyard.
On the ground floor, there are small rooms for residents' private belongings. The apartments are reached via staircases. The toilets are shared, so are the storage facilities. In traditional Japanese homes and communities, communal space and private space are always interconnected.
The courtyard is not enclosed and not locked. Anyone can enter. Open homes like this are found in many countries in rural areas. But this one is in one of the largest cities in the world.
In the Yokohama apartment, the first floor is supported by these four structures. And between them is what we call the yard. The yard permits a certain amount of screening through the use of curtains, but the basic idea is that it's physically and visually connected with the street at street level. The residents take food from their pantries in the yard and can cook together there, outside their apartments. There is no clear dividing line between public and private space. The public space consists of a number of private spheres, in which individuals spend time as they like. Public space and private space thus complement one another.
Tokyo is a shock, like a dangerous delirium, a balancing act between spiritual tradition and consumerism at the highest level. Comparable only to Manhattan or the new shopping paradises in Arabia. Tokyo is also the most important business metropolis in Asia. One of the most modern cities in the world, incredibly wealthy, incredibly expensive, incredibly diverse in the way it enjoys its standard of living. But members of a highly developed society also need somewhere to live, so architects are looking for flexible and innovative floor plan concepts that will guarantee individuality in the megacity. Architect Hitoshi Wakamatsu found one solution in the Sakura apartment house.
I can't really say whether I'm influenced by tradition, but I've lived in Tokyo all my life, so the city and its traditions have certainly influenced my life and my work. Plots of land are so small in Tokyo that there's never much more than a narrow gap between two buildings. So the crucial question is, what do you do with it?
Smooth, exposed concrete, clear, simple, purist, like so much in Japan. On 5 floors, a system of walkways provides access to a cluster of cubes, modules defining the structure of the apartments. Individual elements can be combined to permit variable floor plans. The outdoor walkways are like the corridors in conventional apartment houses.
I worked with an irregular arrangement of cubes, but the individual cubes are not apartments. They are rooms which can be combined to form apartments. So an apartment can consist of 1, 2, or more rooms. Vertical combination is also possible over 2 floors. The whole concept revolves around variability and combinability.
The walkways need to be imagined as busy communication routes. Families and neighbours move around in the same space. This is an attempt to encourage community rather than anonymity, to recreate a bit of village or small town life in a compact space. An innovative concept for a 21st century apartment in a massive urban environment.
This is the lift. The apartments are created by combining various cubes. They may consist of just a single cube or of 2 or 3. So the apartments are all totally different. The corners are rounded to facilitate light incidence and enable the wind to flow through the building. So it's bright and airy everywhere. It also provides a view. You have clear sight lines in every direction.
The Sakura apartments are like a vertical village in the city. As in most other Asian societies, there is no precise word here for city. Many countries in this part of the world were catapulted from courtly society to modern urban culture. The Sakura House is a revolutionary idea for Tokyo, a concept for the future that tries to learn from the courtyard houses that dominated the urban core before the city exploded and became a megacity. Tokyo is always on the move. Only at night does the rhythm slow down for a few hours. Tokyo is like an endless choreography of city dwellers, formally dressed, many of them stylish, ambitious, and disciplined. The city is a cosmos of its own, a world that functions smoothly virtually all of the time. Despite it being a chaotic patchwork of sprawl and growth without a master plan, there is no chaos here. Tokyo is a paradise for unconventional ideas, focusing on space and housing for the 21st century. Architect Sou Fujimoto agrees.
Tokyo, it's quite unique to have no really strong center. It's more like several different nodes relating to each other to make a really complex networks of the field. And every time you are going to the one small pathway, then you will find another really exciting something. And then our experience is getting more and more like a weaving networks of the urban fabrics.
Tokyo's transformation into a big modern city started in the 1960s. It's constantly remodeling, constantly reinventing itself. And the same goes for private dwellings, which normally stand for no more than 30 years and are then replaced.
And in that situation, I think, for example, in case of the Tokyo apartment, it's quite strong, unique pieces of the house shape are stacked up to create the three-dimensional Tokyo-like situation, and some of the staircases is going up. So it is like not ideal, but kind of a really conceptual miniature of the Tokyo situations.
These Tokyo apartments are miniature detached houses stacked side by side and one on top of another. But they also incorporate outside space, which forms a transparent capsule around them. And that is where they differ in concept and size from conventional detached houses. This takes courage and, above all, discipline. Architects outside Japan can learn from these designs. Space in the city is expensive, and it needs to be handled with care if individuality is not to be lost.
At the very beginning, it was just funny ideas to stack them up. But then I thought, in such a situations, we could create the pathways, like a staircases going up, and sometimes walking on the roof, to create more three-dimensional networks of the people. Then I thought it is not just a composition of the object, but more like relating to the behaviors of the people.
People in Tokyo spend most of the day in town and not at home, so homes don't need to be large. They do need to be personalized, though, wherever they may be in this endless urban landscape.
In the real Tokyo situation, we have the winding pathways, but not making a three-dimensionally usually. But if you can make such kind of a three-dimensional pathways, for example, going up on the rooftop, or sometimes use this sloping rooftop as a kind of a sloping garden, then it is quite amazing, funny reinterpretation of the Tokyo urban situation. Tokyo itself is a house, or Tokyo itself is an architecture, was the starting point of the Tokyo apartment.
Tokyo is speed and movement on multiple levels. Its density and verticality is found in the micro-architecture that expresses Japanese architects' revolutionary ideas for 21st century living. But crowded cities are relatively new in Japan, as architect Mitsuhiko Sato explains.
In cities in Europe, people have long been accustomed to living without much space. But in Japan, even in urban areas, population densities were generally low until the modern age. Then the population grew sharply and density increased. So Japan is still wrestling with the question of how people should live together in the modern age. And it may not yet have found the right answers.
Mitsuhiko Sato became an international celebrity for his small-scale projects, which are found in every part of Tokyo. Stacked concrete containers for 3 families, or an extremely narrow residential building for journalists, complete with a self-contained semi-basement apartment.
I'd like to help shape that development. I think it will change the face of present-day Tokyo and urban housing in general. I've always given thought to possible concepts, and the primary focus has always been efficient use of indoor space.
His Komatsunagi apartment house is an unusual development for Japan. It's a cooperative house. All buyers knew in advance who their neighbors would be. They didn't just move anonymously into an apartment block. The community as a whole was also able to confer with the architect and realize ideas of their own. That is a first for Japan and for Asia as a whole.
In conventional buildings, there are walls with windows set in them, and the rooms are subdivided. This is the floor plan, and this is the section. Instead of an individual wall like this, I use an arrangement of pillars which I enclose in glass. In front of that, I place a metal screen, and inside I leave maximum scope for personalization.
In contrast to the stacks of micro-dwellings closed to the outside, Sato's terrace house is designed to open the living space towards the surroundings, the neighborhood. This open living may not be to everyone's taste, but the residents here love it.
My name is Satomi Aonuma.
My name is Satoshi Ohara.
You really can't walk around naked at home. But if you let down the blinds, you have privacy. And if you leave them open, you have more space that you can use.
Even our relationship as a couple has changed. We talk about lots of things and share lots of things with one another. I think living in a house like this has an influence on family life.
My husband and I both go out to work, and Mighty spends most of the day at home alone. So we wanted an apartment where he would feel as comfortable as possible. And I think he's very happy here.
The most striking thing, of course, is the bathtub, which is right next to the window. You don't normally find something like that in Japan. Prior to moving in, we were a bit doubtful about it. But Mr. Sato kept urging us to leave it that way. And we did.
Tokyo today is still a sprawling patchwork of small and medium-sized houses interspersed with larger buildings, an ever-changing patchwork with no real system. There are not many parks or other open public spaces in Asian cities. The public space is the street, the inner courtyard, or the vertical access route, the stairwell. Everything is small and contained, designed to ensure at least a bit of privacy in an otherwise public-built environment. In this traditionally modern city, space is the most precious commodity. So the model developed by architects Ayano Uchimura and Satoku Shinohara is almost revolutionary. They want house communities to be like families, and they want the community to be given space. Ayano Uchimura believes families need to be created in a city that makes family life almost impossible.
I live here myself. In the past, I had a largish one-room apartment where I lived and also worked. So there were days when I never saw another person. Today, I share an office and live in shared accommodation with young men and women. So I always have someone to talk to when I come home. I think that's important, also for the future.
The multi-story building is like a vertical tent, transparent to the outside world. Inside, a staircase connects the different levels. The idea of incorporating individual living spaces into this vertical structure was inspired by Satoku Shinohara's childhood.
I lived in a fairly traditional house. The front door gave straight onto a room that extended right up to the roof. And under the roof, there was space to keep silkworms. Clustered around that hall were a number of small rooms. The high-ceilinged entrance hall in my concept is inspired by that traditional farmhouse where I grew up.
The two architects' design is perhaps the most radical variation of the same basic theme: minimization of private living space and rediscovery of the community and neighborhood. Buildings like this ideally fit into gaps in the urban landscape, raising density and at the same time presenting a new living concept. It's a kind of rural architecture for the 21st century, built to modern standards and realizable anywhere at low cost.
I used to create designs where a number of buildings stood on a single site, but in the end, they were reduced to one. This was the plan. Here, I imagined a big, empty rectangular box and tried to see how I could arrange small rooms inside it. It's exactly 10 meters high and 6 meters wide. And the depth is 12 meters. I tried fitting the boxes inside. For example, arranging them like this, or like this. I made a number of attempts. I didn't want to divide the levels into a ground floor, first floor, second floor, and so on. I wanted a single communal space created by the arrangement of the boxes. At the time, I simulated arrangements of small boxes inside a large one.
Tokyo is not like other cities. It is a special case, a patchwork urban landscape created before rural exodus swept Asia. Tokyo is like a laboratory, a kind of urban test bed, perhaps just for Japan, but perhaps also for cities all over the world, wherever there is a shortage of space.